The purpose of this session really is to inspire the young people to benefit from the brains, the achievements, the values of the Nobel Prize winners. And, it's very humbling to stand here as the foreign minister and wonder what in the world I'm going to say that's going to be of any use. But if you're going to forget everything else that I'm going to say, I just want the young students to know it's a wonderful time to be alive. It's a time of great danger, but also a time of exhilarating opportunities. And it is a time in history when science, technology, politics, global affairs, and humanity are all telescoping into a focal point. I suppose George would say this is almost like a black hole, and with grave and great opportunities. So let me make a ramble through some of these issues, and it's obviously not going to be a comprehensive lecture, but hopefully enough for you to start thinking and then to ask questions from the real Nobel Prize winners when they get on stage. First point, science has been a key driving force for human progress. It has shaped the past, and where we are today is a large result of the Industrial Revolution, and it will continue to shape the megatrends of the future. The development of the steam engine, railways, electricity, aviation, shipping, modern medicine, and now the digital revolution. These are just some of the examples in which science and technology have transformed our societies, have disrupted societies, families, politics, and diplomacy. Now, I will confess to being a techno-optimist, and that means I believe that the emergence and continuing progress of science and technology will bring more good than bad. But it is important to have your eyes wide open and to realize and to acknowledge that technology has always been a double-edged sword. Next point is that much of the progress that we have seen, especially in the last 200 years during the Industrial Revolution, has really been because science has been a global collaborative effort. And really what has happened in the last 2 centuries is that we've all been working off the same common stack of basic science, applied research, techniques and technologies, and shared it across the world. Access to ideas, the ability to disseminate those ideas, the creation of patents and intellectual property, a system in which there would still be sufficient fiscal and profit motives for inventors, and yet information, technology, and ideas would be disseminated worldwide. And the ability to all collaboratively on a global scale work on this single stack has been a key reason why science has advanced at such an accelerating pace in the last 2 centuries. Now, it is also equally important to understand it's not just about a global scale, but also getting a right balance between academia, private enterprise, and governments. Because if you think about it, translating basic science and applied research into novel products and services actually requires a functioning ecosystem of rules, finance, and ideas. Rules, finance, and ideas. If you don't get these 3 things right, you will not get the accelerating wheel of innovation moving. In the digital revolution, the area which has attracted a lot of attention is Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, we've seen a unique constellation of top universities collaborating with enterprises fueled by money and ambition, and also a facilitative set of social rules and government support. And the point I wanted to emphasize here is that we need to get the balance right between the profit motive on one hand, and that really animates the private sector. You do need to get the ethical rules right, because technology is always double-edged, and you want to make sure it is used for the welfare of humanity rather than just for the sake of generating more money, or worse, just to accumulate power. And in more recent decades, there's been a third dimension to this, which is the impact on the ecological balance of the planet. So understand that there is a triad, right? Private profits, ethical rules, ecological impact. Now let's cast our minds through some recent examples of these factors in play, or when they are not in play, or worse, when they are unbalanced. The most recent, of course, is the COVID pandemic. From a purely scientific perspective, the unprecedented pace of the development of PCR tests, the publication of the genome of the virus, literally within weeks. The incredible pace at which vaccines were created and then made available to the world. This is a cause for celebration of the triumph of science. We also had the COVAX facility to help to organize and distribute vaccines across the world, and the word vaccine multilateralism that Prime Minister Lee coined, I think back in June 2020, has become mainstream. But actually, if you stop to think about it, even as you celebrate the achievements of science in dealing with this pandemic, the brutal fact is the pandemic also exposed major gaps in the world's collective pandemic prevention, preparedness, and our response. The truth is, with all the knowledge and with all the tools that we had at hand, we didn't do as well as we could have and as we should have. Even if you look within societies, and there are now papers which analyze the differential mortality rates resulting from COVID across different countries. And it turns out it's not just a matter of wealth of a nation or sophistication of our hospital care systems, but in fact, a crucial dimension has been the element of trust, of social capital. Whether citizens trust each other to do the right thing, whether we're able to collaborate to look out for each other, and relating to science, the credibility of scientific authority, and with that, political authority as well. The point is, it's not good enough to know the scientific facts or to have all the vaccines and techniques and tools available if you cannot persuade people to do the right thing. So this has been another key insight from COVID-19. And yet, the doctors in this room will tell you COVID-19 is not the first, it's not the last, and it's not even the most severe global pandemic that we will face. And given the state of the world now, and the way we've organized our economies and our societies, in fact, the risk of successive pandemics have gone up, not gone down. And so we will need to continue to emphasize research in public health and epidemiology, but really we will also equally need to focus our minds on humanity, on how we relate to one another, how information is disseminated, is believed or not, and how we overcome the echo chambers and the cesspools of misinformation which are proliferating in modern society. This goes beyond what I'm sure we will continue to do very well, which is the development of new diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccines across the globe. I'm actually not so worried about the ability of scientists and healthcare professionals within our own domains. But it is the whole of society response which is lacking. Another example is climate change. It is, in fact, the most pressing. People used to say long-term, but in fact, it is now near-term challenge facing humanity. Just look at the newspapers in the last couple of months. Extreme weather events in different parts of the world. No region is spared. You see sweltering heat waves with record temperatures. You see more severe rainfalls, floods, and even colder winters. And I can, in my own level, because I travel all over the world at a crazy pace, even in my journeys, I've experienced temperatures in the high 40s to the negatives. And the news and the requirement for us to cooperate and collaborate diplomatically to deal with these disasters has become more urgent. The drumbeat of alarm is real. And yet, we do have a responsibility to ensure a sustainable future for the young people. And the young people, I'm glad, have in fact embraced this cause with fervor because, in a sense, I suppose they realize that they have more at stake because they're going to be around here on this world longer than the older generation. We know that we're not going to reach our targets. I spent years also negotiating the Paris Agreement. We hoped we would be able to keep the temperature rise at 1.5 degrees. But in fact, today we're already 1.1 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And the World Meteorological Organization warns there is a 50% chance of temporarily breaching the threshold for at least one of the next 5 years. The trouble with statistics is that you think, well, 1 in 5 years, at least one of the next 5 years and 50%. The thing I always remind from a medical perspective, we can quote these statistics to patients, but when it happens to you, it's 100%. So we can't afford to take this lightly. Now, it is true that there will be new research breakthroughs and new technologies that will help us deal with climate change. And yes, there are available sources of renewable energy, clean energy, including solar, wind, geothermal, small modular nuclear reactors, green hydrogen, etc., which can reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and cut our greenhouse gas emissions. But really, whether or not we achieve it will depend on politics and economics. And we will require collaboration across the globe because human beings are always susceptible to the free rider temptation, which means if everyone else reduces and I don't have to make the sacrifices, I'll try to get away with it. This is not a time when we can afford free riding, either at an individual level or at an international level. Now let me change topics and give you another source for concern. Geostrategic rivalry. We watch the difficult and complicated relationship between the United States and China. Right now, there's a war in Europe, in Ukraine. And apart from all the risk of war and the human calamity that results, there is also an impact on science. And that is, if there is a real attempt at technological bifurcation and breaking apart innovation systems and supply chains, which, as I said earlier, the fact that we could work at global scale before is a key reason why we made so much progress. But if geostrategic rivalry really breaks this apart, there will be a big problem. Because it means, by definition, a world that is more divided, more volatile, more unstable. It means a world with higher inflation because supply chains will no longer work on the basis of efficiency. Just in time becomes replaced by just in case. And just in case is more expensive because you have to pay an insurance premium. And my worry is that in the scientific field, it will shut off avenues for cooperation. It will deepen divisions at a time when we need more cooperation, not less. And even for scientists, you will know that sometimes even your passport matters. And this is not healthy for science. This is not good for diplomacy or for world peace. So the point is, we have a problem with the global commons, whether it is about pandemics or whether it is about the management and application of science and technology or the global economy. And here, all we can do, because we are a tiny city-state, is to appeal to the better angels of leaders in countries which are bigger and whose decisions have a more profound impact on what will happen in the world. Now, although I've talked about geostrategic rivalry, it's also worth remembering that, in fact, if you can get the balance between competition and cooperation right, many good things can happen. I will refer to what the United States, I think, called the Sputnik moment, when they suddenly realized that the Soviet Union had got to space first. And it focused the minds, brought all the elements of science and economics and government together. And yes, America reached the moon first. But what is also worth remembering is that right now we have a 23-year-old International Space Station, about 400 kilometers above us in low Earth orbit. And it is a collaborative effort between Russia, United States, I think Japan, Canada, and Europe. Now, if we can maintain these patterns of cooperation in the midst of competition and without succumbing to geostrategic rivalry and war, then there is hope. One other area I want to draw attention to is artificial intelligence. We are on the cusp of a profound technological breakthrough because until recently, pattern recognition was an exclusive domain of human beings. Today, machines are able to use pattern recognition, and systems can hear, can see, can speak, and can organize. And we're only just beginning. But I also wanted to remind you that this is an extremely sharp double-edged sword. And let me just give you two dimensions to think about. First, artificial intelligence and the decision-making that will be delegated to artificial systems basically means we will now have decision-making mechanisms which exceed the speed of human thought. What it means, just to put a political dimension to this, is that the time frame for top leaders to make in high-pressure situations, war or peace, life or death, that time is going to be compressed to a moment. And it's worth remembering that actually human thought, wisdom, and time to exercise judgment has not increased, although our machines have increased. So what that means is the probability of mishaps, miscalculations, and miscommunication in the future will greatly increase. And if you cast your mind back to the Cold War, when supposedly mutually assured destruction between nuclear powers was supposed to secure the peace, actually now when you read the declassified papers, you know we had a few close shaves. Can you imagine a future when nuclear buttons are actually outsourced to artificial intelligence? And even if you say there's going to be a human in the middle, but the decision time is reduced to an instant, I think it's a more dangerous future. There's another aspect to AI which bears thinking about, which is, without getting into the mathematics of how you train and enable deep learning by simulated neural nets. But the point is, a lot of conclusions or meta decisions of AI actually have a layer of incalculability, or perhaps I should say inexplainability in human terms. The machine will make the right call, but it may not be able to explain to humans why it made that decision. And once you start getting into black boxes where even the creator no longer understands how the decision was arrived at, you also take the risk of algorithmic failure, which can result in catastrophic situations and consequences, wittingly or unwittingly. So the point I'm making is that AI holds the potential to augment conventional nuclear and cyber war capabilities, and also makes strategic interactions between superpowers and even middle powers more unpredictable. And in fact, if you think that nuclear weapons were confined to a few states, AI and the ability for autonomous killing machines will not be confined to just a few states. So my point is that we actually need to integrate the power of artificial intelligence into a responsible pattern based on humanity and ethics and international relations in a constructive way. And if we fail to do this, we are entering very dangerous waters. My final example I want to think about is synthetic biology, genetic engineering. In the last, I would say, 2 decades, the simultaneous and mutually reinforcing revolutions in genetics, computing, nanomaterials, and robotics, just to cite 4 subdimensions, have opened up grand vistas for synthetic biology, genetic engineering, surgery, treatment. We have the potential to completely revolutionize the way we deliver healthcare. And yes, Yap Singh is right, we will live longer, hopefully a higher quality of life. But there are in fact huge ethical and social quandaries which we need to navigate together. For instance, gene editing allows us to eliminate genetic diseases, sometimes even before a child is born. But where do you draw the line when it comes to germline editing? And right now we know of at least one scientist who is in jail for embarking on an experiment that was completely unethical. But when you get down to actually editing human genomes and germlines, in fact, we have reached the stage when you can edit human nature. Now, until recently, as I said, progress has been the result of science and technology. But what has not changed is generally the human genome, human nature. Once we edit human nature, all bets are off, because now we become part of that phenomena of great change too. So anyway, I don't want to go on, and I particularly do not want to scare the young people into a pessimistic view of the future. But come back to the theme of this dialogue, the future that we want together. And the key word is together. Global problems require global solutions. They cannot be solved by any one person or one country, no matter how smart or how wealthy you are. And despite all our differences in nationality, culture, political leanings, I believe there's far more that unites us as humans than divides us. And even if the politics takes time to be worked out, my message to you today is that all of us have agency. Commit to scientific development and progress in search of a better world and better outcomes for human beings. And I'm very glad that the Nobel Laureates are here, and I've had the chance to have private conversations with them. And you will find that all Nobel Laureates are not just about science or about domains, but they come with values and a very broad worldview. So platforms like the Nobel Prize Dialogue are more important. Laura, you got to have more of these sessions all over the world. It is an opportunity to share ideas, learn from one another, discover our common humanity, look for global solutions to global problems, find new networks of collaboration, expand your minds, but do not lose your grounding in humanity, and understand that through collaboration, we can create a better future for the next generation to come. So to all the young people, I'll conclude with where I began. This is an exhilarating moment to be alive. A dangerous world, but a world replete with opportunities. Seize it, and for those of us in science and in STEM, and yet also with a sensitivity to humanity, I can think of no greater intellectual challenge and yet profound impact on the future. So thank you, and have a wonderful session ahead. Thank you very much.